Hi everyone, welcome to the graphic novel panel, which is planned by the events team at the Center for Career and Professional Development. My name is Sophie Tannhauser, I'm a professor here at Pratt, and I'd like to introduce our panelists. Daryl Ayo is Io. Sorry, I had it written down and pronounced it wrong anyways. We'll see how I do on the other names. I could be 3 for 3 with mispronunciations. Daryl Ayo is a New York-based cartoonist, critic, and commentator. His comics have been published by or featured in House of 12, Rhinestone Comics, Dark Horse Comics, Grindhouse, Image Comics, Wolf, and The Nib. Ayo's critical writing has appeared on the MNT, Nerds of Color, and Comics Cube with an X. Ayo has participated in discussions at SPX, the Society of Illustrators, Inkstuds, Process Party, and at his one true home at twitter.com at Daryl Ayo. Audrey Bash is a graduate from the Center for Cartoon Studies. Her graphic novel, Waylon Part 1, was nominated for an Ignatz Award. Ivy Jo-Yu Chen is a communication design graduate from Pratt Institute with a focus on UI and UX interaction and information design. She is the owner and designer of Upon Studio based in New York. So I have 3 questions here that Kathy, who is behind me, came up with, and then we're going to open it up to a Q&A at the end of the panel. So the first question is, how can people enter the industry?
Sure? Okay, so the good thing is that entering the comics industry is easy. All you have to do is make a comic. So, however, whichever way you want to do that, in any form you want to do that. So, I tried to take a couple of notes first, but the first thing is to, whether you want to self-publish a mini comic or put up a web comic, it's fine. It's about, you do it once, but the most important thing is the second time, the third time, and then sort of like understanding your own patterns about that, understanding like how it fits into your life, how fast or slow you are. It doesn't matter fast, slow, it doesn't matter at all. Like, but what does matter is sort of knowing like what your rate is, what your pace is, and never agreeing to take on more than what you know yourself to be capable of with any other responsibilities you have in your life, because for a time you might be, if you're just doing that, it's known to happen for a spell of time. You might not have additional responsibilities, and it might seem like you can do a lot more. You might have a couple jobs, family responsibilities, but just make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, that you know how long it takes you to do it, and don't let anybody kind of like force your hand into doing more at that time than you're capable of. There always are more chances in the future.
I think it's also important, like when we're talking about like the comics industry, like what delineations there are like within the industry itself. Because I feel like you can make, like Daryl said, like your own, you could like self-publish your comics, and I think those are gonna like fit into like a certain category of the industry, whether that's like you tabling at conventions or like just publishing your work online. And so I think figuring out like what kind of like audience you want, and like what niche you think you fit into within like the kind of work you're making is important, and like where you see yourself within the industry.
I think I totally agree with the first point you mentioned, like create a solid work, because that's also what I want to talk about. Is like you have to create not 1 or 2 or 3 work, you have to really create a body of work like consistently. I think if you already finish that volume, you already are in a good foundation in the industry. So I think that's a really important first step. So you just introduced me as a communication designer. So I do have a design studio, just myself, but also I kind of start out, so I don't do graphic novels. So my forte is more like zines. So I have this side project aside from my design life. So there are exploration zines. So early in, like a few years ago, I kind of just start with this idea that I just learned about anything I got interested in. It can be like a plant, like I saw like when I traveled to Arizona, or it can be like just a geometric, like a shape. So just anything I got interested in, because I feel a lot of time people just like get lost, like you just like pass through the curiosity and then just let it go. But I was thinking like maybe I should just focus like 1 night or 2 nights just to like do something, learn about it, and then put it in a one book format. So that's kind of how I started, and then I kind of start like do one after another and another. These two is like, so these are just a few selections. And back to how do you enter the industry, because for me, I totally come from a design background, I have a full-time day job. I think a great way, after you have like a collection of your work, then you can apply to stuff. Say, what I did is I applied to New York Art Fair in 2016, just as a self-publisher, like artist, just apply for a table there. And I think it was really daunting for me at that time, because I've been going there and everyone's great, like it's kind of hard to get into, I heard, but I just did it anyway, and just like buff yourself up. Like every time I say I do something, I say we do something. Like it's I kind of just like do this kind of thing and try to like look legit and build a website. And luckily I got in, and I think that's like my first step, and then you can go to other art fairs like Philadelphia or some smaller ones, or the MoCA for comic art. I think that's really great for graphic novels, comic art. I think so. Aside from art fair, there's some other thing you can also think about, say, reaching out to publishers, like local publishers or bookstores. Like in New York, there are Print Matter, which is a really great bookstore. They have such a big collection. So basically, so you go to their website, anyone can just submit your work there. Like you just mail in or drop off, and with the application form, they will say they like it, they will keep it, and then you'll have a consignment agreement. So that's also another way to get yourself noticed. So I think like art book fair is definitely great. Like comic art book fair as well. Like all this exposure would be kind of a really good first entering point.
Sometimes you don't even need to like apply your work to a store. Like I know that Gabe at Desert Island will literally just like take anything, and if it sells, then like he'll ask for more. So it's just a matter of like putting yourself out there. I think also what like sets the cartooning, the comics community apart from like a lot of other industries is that it's also, well, I just said like a community. So it's the kind of thing where you can also just like, the more you make yourself visible, the more you're like kind of like just sort of making yourself a part of the industry, because I think cartoonists are also supporting each other in the process. So like if you post your work on Instagram and you're hashtagging it and being like consistent about your output, I think inevitably like, people are gonna start like paying attention to you, and you're gonna kill it. I don't know.
Right, I think that's totally great. Like just promote yourself, like shamelessly.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Our next question, related, how can people navigate? So we have entering and navigate.
We're traveling. There's so many resources. I don't know. Navigation. Twitter and like all the social media is like a really good thing. I feel like I learn about so many new artists through Instagram, especially, and I think that most of my favorite cartoonists I discovered through social media, whether they were suggested to me or I'll like stalk what other artists are like paying attention to on it, and then I end up, you know, like buying their work through their store that they link through their Instagram. And so I think that like for me, like social media, I feel like is like I feel like it's just as effective as if you were to like actually like pay to like advertise yourself, except that it's free. So I would highly recommend that everybody takes full advantage of that. I don't know. What does navigating through the cartoon community mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like this question is a little bit abstract,
Yeah.
and I feel like it always comes back to like how you feel about yourself and how you
Yeah.
feel about your work. Like your feeling about your work will like change the way you navigate. I feel like navigate is such a like an emotional way. Like it's not like something real. It's like something it's more conceptual, right? So so I can only speak from my own experience, and I feel like one of my thought is like probably you can start like part-time doing it. I think that's to me is kind of key because I feel like when you start out it's really hard to be like financially support yourself totally, like from my point of view and from my experience. So I always had a like full-time job. So to take the stress of having to rely on your personal work to really like feed you, and I feel that's really important for me to develop the work, the kind of work you really care, and the kind of work you really want to do for your like personal expression. So I feel like taking part-time, I think that's for me it's like how I started, and I think that kind of help me with the freedom in what I want to do. And also apply for events that give you exposure, so like art book fairs, or I feel like social media is definitely a really important way, like nowadays, and also talk to people that maybe they don't know you and they don't know your work. I think that's also the exposure is about. Like not only if you go to a fair, not only museum people will come and see, but also there were just students or just random people, they would just come by and they just get curious. And then I feel that kind of exposure will really help you to understand what kind of work you made and kind of help you to see your own work from other perspective. I think that's also really, really important, and I think I learned that so much from just tabling, like in different places. So maybe another thing I want to say is about cold emailing. I know like cold emailing is it kind of sucks, right? Like people say it works, people say it doesn't work. But for me, I would say it works. As long as it's daunting, like still, like you just find out some email from some website and you want to get something from them, right? So you want to say, oh, I want to sell my books with you, or I want to show with you. It's daunting to start, but I'd say it works. Like if you have a solid work, like a collection of work, and you are confident in your work, and then you cold email, and people will reply. Like not every one of them, but some of them will, and then it's like you jump from one point to another point, and then another point, and I think that's like navigation, right? And I think that's what I feel. Alright.
Yeah. Well, I kind of got ahead of myself in my notes, but navigation, in my personal opinion, is about pacing yourself a lot. The thing about comics in general is that everything you're doing takes time, and not just time, but like it's usually an ongoing project. So when it's there's a lot of feeling often that you want things to be done and stuff, but you have to sort of like sit in the process and let it be slow and be patient with it, and also just like and don't be sort of intimidated, I guess, if if it seems that this project is taking forever, or if it's or if you think that opportunities are passing you by, they're really not. Even though it's true there aren't a ton of individual specific opportunities per se in the general economics field, they do continue to occur, and you're not going to, it's not going to be necessarily beneficial to drop what you're doing if you're in the middle of doing something to latch on to something just because that thing came along. The other thing is just be very communicative. Talk to people a lot. Answer your emails, and just let people know how you're doing when you're working with other people. Because even when you're working by yourself, you're still going to be working with other people to some extent, and they often just want to know what's going on and where you're at with things. And so it's like it's a lot of stuff that's like not terribly exciting to hear about, but it's like the day-to-day, just sort of like keeping people appraised as to keeping the people who need to be appraised about what you're doing, about what you're doing, and just sort of and stay out of fights if you can, but don't be afraid to get into fights if you have to, because nothing bad will ever happen to you.
Can I ask what kind of fights?
Oh, so many.
Physical.
Comics fight, what does that entail?
Social media fight.
Everybody's a person, and you don't have to be scared of them. If somebody's doing something wrong, then it doesn't have, it's not necessarily in your head. Like, they can just be wrong, and you can do something about it if it's within your, I don't know, if it's within your sphere of influence. You're going to meet people who you think are okay and turn out to not be okay, and you're going to have to deal with that one way or another. It depends on, what the situation is. At the same time, you don't have to turn every disagreement into a federal case, but it's a very friendly community, but it's also a very accessible community, which means that literally not literally, but just about anybody can just be in comics just by just hanging around. There's a lot of people out there, and that means that some of you are gonna bump heads, clash, etc. And it's okay to disagree with people. It's okay to not like people, and it's okay to come to a decision that somebody else is, absolutely wrong, and you don't have to put up with anything because somebody might have a particular position. There's other people in the same position somewhere else. Blah blah blah. Don't be too afraid of people.
I think that's a very good point, because and also when you work with large organizations or people, they'll come to you and say, you get great exposure with us, but I want you to work for free. Then you just have to stand your ground, I guess, and don't be pushed over so much. And that's
I was thinking the opposite.
Opposite how?
So you think?
For me, I had a recent experience where I was commissioned by BuzzFeed to do a piece for them, in which they wanted me to speak on a topic that was very close to me and very important to me. And the initial drafts that I was giving them they were not satisfied with it because it wasn't in line with their BuzzFeed aesthetic, their perspective. And I basically watched myself conform to what they wanted because of the trade-off that I was going to get for it, the exposure, and they were going to pay me. It was commissioned, and I watched myself basically hand them a finished product that was more in line with what I felt they wanted rather than what I wanted. And so I think in the end, I don't regret that I went through that, because I learned a lot about the process of working within the the industry and like what it is to like maybe disagree with like someone that you're collaborating with.
Yeah.
But I also learned that I don't want to do that again. I want to get paid for my work, but I want to also like speak from my own I want to make sure I speak from my own perspective. So yeah, I guess I am not contradictory ultimately.
You're like,
But
"Please, Rob."
That reminds me of something else though, because I had a very similar opposite to that scenario where I was, somebody reached out to me from a publication, sadly no longer around, but they reached out to me and they were like, we want to work with you and do this thing. And I read all of their magazines and like tried very hard to do what they did, and the result was very poor. And then the editor said, look, this is what we're looking for. And they sent me my own stuff back to me and said, and I was like, oh, okay. So like it sounds like in your situation it was a dialogue, right? Which is
yeah, extensively.
and I think that like what ended up happening is that there was so much time wasted in this project that like when so much initial time wasted that the project couldn't be completed, because if we both come to the understanding that they weren't looking for what they normally do, they were looking for me specifically to do something different than they normally do. I thought they were looking for me to do what all their other artists do. So, I mean, it's an easy mistake to make because you see someone's product and you're like, oh, they must want me to do this.
Oh, that is the flip side, yeah.
Yeah, but, you know,
Interesting.
but I think that also ties into the thing I said earlier, like you have to talk to people a lot and talk to them frequently and talk to them early.
Yeah.
And so that when there are those sorts of things, they can, if they're the client, they can steer you towards a path that they want, or you can, if it's needed, you can come to a mutual decision that maybe you don't want to do that. But either case, that could have been avoided. But you know, it's like it's very interesting because that just reminded me of like a very similar situation, but flipped around.
So the third question is, and you've already started to answer it, how can people be successful in this industry? How do you want to define success?
I guess just like to piggyback on myself, I would say that make sure you make work that you maybe aren't gonna like 100% like agree with in terms of like what the message is or like what the style is, but make sure you make work that you're gonna like be proud of. And this seems kind of like moot, but it matters to me that you're gonna be proud of and that you're gonna want to share. Because I find that, sometimes I'm like so willing to just like do things for other people or for like these commissions that I'm not amassing like necessarily a portfolio that I would want to like have representing me, because it's like not exactly like what I want to show for myself. So I think success is based on like just feeling like really proud of like what you make, and I don't know. Something else.
Okay. All right, so I would say the most important word I can think of is perseverance. So let me see what I said. You must make work that is uniquely your own, and you must continue making your work even if people don't understand it at first. You know, if at first there's no place for you, stick with it and keep making your weird art. Your continued presence will force a place for you. You will create a context for yourself simply by insisting upon occupying space. Which is to say, sometimes the things that people love the most are the things that sort of stuck out because they were just sort of like weird, no one knew what to do with it. But just by staying around and by continuing to do what you do, and continue to insist, even when people say you're doing it wrong, or they don't have to say it. It's subtly implied that you're doing things wrong, and people don't kind of look at your stuff and shrug. But if you keep working at it and you keep, and it's the thing we were saying before, like you keep multiplying your stuff, you keep making more and more and more of it, by virtue of it being that much stuff that you created, it will already be something identifiable. Like you can just be your own genre if it comes down to it. And there's several people who are, because even though their stuff didn't fit into the scene the way it was when they arrived, their presence created that new niche, and they became that market. So, I mean, and of course, if your work is not like weird or anything, I'm a weirdo, but like if your work is like very much in line with the kind of established ways that people make work, again, perseverance. You have to continue making stuff in order to get recognized within the established style. So it's always just like putting your foot down and insisting that you are going to just keep making this stuff, and eventually people will wonder why this person who hasn't gone away, they just sort of assume that you are down and know what you're talking about, and they'll just like start asking you to do stuff. So
Yeah, I totally agree with it. The perseverance, how do you say it?
Perception.
Perseverance.
Yeah,
Okay.
just like
New vocabulary. Cool. So I feel like my thought about this question is to answer how can someone be successful in the field, then probably you should ask yourself, how do you define successful? Like, there are different ways. Like, are you going to be financially successful, or you just like, you are like famous, like that, or you like get something out of your work. I feel like, to me, like when you keep doing work, like keep doing things you love and keep developing yourself, that's a form of success in itself. And I think that's like, even though when you start out, you don't get like so much money and you are struggling, but you're still kind of taking that path. And I think like everyone has their own path to success, and there's no reference to anyone. Like everybody just like go their own way, and that's I think how creative industry works. Like especially for graphic novels, like what you said, like keep doing weird stuff, and that's really valuable. And another thing, and I want to refer back to what you mentioned before, like be patient, and I think that's so important because success doesn't come overnight. Like everything takes time, and so I think that's also really important to like take it easy with yourself. Like don't push yourself too hard, and don't force yourself, oh, I have to like make the rent, like by selling this. Like it's not gonna be like sustainable. I think you don't want to push yourself too hard, but you do want to keep working. Like I think there's a fine balance between like keep doing stuff, but also like take it easy. Like don't like put it too like under high pressure, and then that's gonna backfire. So I think that's how you do it. And also another important point I want to say is to always to be able to critique your own work. And I think that's so. To me, I think you kind of have to learn over time, because like when you create your own work, then you kind of like get into your own bubble and your own world. And I think sometimes when you talk to people who like have no idea like what you make, or have just like outside, they don't have any creative background, and that's the best when you get someone else's opinion, and then you kind of learn from there to be able to self-critique. Because I think that's also important when you like start to doing stuff for a while, or maybe you get bored, or maybe you want to go next level but you don't know the direction. Then self-critiquing is so important that you just have to evolve like from what you learn and from like what you reflect on yourself. So that's like self-critiquing. The last one I also mentioned before is to be like shameless, kind of like shamelessly. If you want to do something, like you just have to believe in it, and you just be shamelessly like email people and apply to stuff. Depending, like no matter if you get in or no matter if they reply or not, it doesn't matter. It's all about you. And if you do it enough, they will notice, like you said.
I think that was really wise, especially in terms, and when you mentioned like the self-critiquing. I think I relate to that to the extent that like I think for me, it's always been very important to like address my process. Definitely like artistically. I find that like I'll be very much like married to like one way of making comics, and then as soon as like on a whim I'll like try like one little thing that's different, that'll be like a huge breakthrough. So like don't be afraid to like continue experimenting, no matter like how like established you may feel at like your approach, because you never know like when that's gonna like suddenly reveal like that much more potential that you may have. And then yeah, I think that like being patient is also like key, but then having like discipline, because I think that's like what I struggle the most with. I think that like, because I work 9 to 6 Monday through Friday, and I just like have to draw something when I get home. I like don't give myself a choice, and so like it kind of sucks sometimes when I'm like dead tired, and like maybe that's the part that is like maybe being a little hard on myself, but at the same time I know that like the minute you like fall out, you stop drawing is when it only gets harder to like fall back into it. So I think that just like maintaining like a pretty like rigorous discipline with yourself is like a pretty sound way of making sure that you will continue to be productive. Whether that's like set the deadlines for yourself, or I think that's one part where like social media does come into play as like a good sort of catalyst for that, because like I feel like if you know that people are expecting you to make work and you're not producing it, then that creates like, you know, a lot of angsty thoughts in your head. So keep making work, knowing that people like want to see it, and that people are gonna like eat it up. And set the discipline for yourself so that you can like congratulate yourself with like the validation that you'll get when you share it.
That's a really good point, because I struggle with this way a lot.
Yeah.
Like get out.
Yeah.
Basically, like how to. So you're doing full time, but you have to manage some time off, and then I think that I heard a theory, and I think it's such a magic. It's called like 80-20 principle. So basically, they say there are so many things that comes into this one rule. Say like 80% of money all over the world is owned by 20% of people, or like you create 80% of your value in 20% of your time. So it's kind of like comes down to that. And at that time, I was like working full time, but then I was thinking, oh, but I really want to make this kind of personal work. But then say like, actually your value, like 80% of value can be achieved in 20% of the time. So that's like one day out of a week, like work week, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like even though it's such a small time, but by doing it consistently, you get a lot. So you're like basing, you have a good foundation, but then in this like small time, you're probably gonna get some magic. And I think that's,
Another thing is you have to treat it like a job. I'm going to assume that every single person is going to have like the equivalent of a 9 to 5, if not literally a 9 to 5. Like there isn't a ton of money in comics. There's a tiny percentage of people whose full-time and only job is they draw comics. So we're going to assume that you're going to have a job while you're doing this, and you're going to go to your job every day that you're supposed to go, whether it's Monday through Friday or a flexible schedule, whatever, you're going to go. And the struggle is then becoming your own boss and forcing yourself to go to work for yourself, like what you were talking about. Like there was like you said after work. You said for me it's before work. There's you got to figure out what works better for you and what. But you also have to just like enforce it, like in the same way that you wouldn't expect to still have a job if you just like didn't bother to show up.
Yeah.
You should have the same discipline for this work of yours, and just the idea that like even though there's no external person, tapping their foot waiting for you to show up, you have to be that person for yourself, and you have to know that the consequence is you don't get to have the satisfaction of the work that you want to be producing, if not, which is basically the only thing you could probably hold over yourself, but still. But yeah, I found that it's possibly the only thing that's actually worked for me is to sort of want to be a certain type of artist and then just create the circumstances in my life that would happen. So whether it was say getting up an hour earlier than is necessary to go to work in order to make sure that I have that time for me, that has been the thing that I've done sometimes. I have done things where like in the evenings, whatever it is for you, you have to find out how to, I mean, I draw, well, not so much anymore, but I've had jobs where I've drawn my stuff during my lunch break, but you have to find the space, and it's actually kind of amazing what you can do in just 1 hour. No, not even an hour, with like 30 minutes, but 30 minutes consistently every day. Like you can, like if you don't already know, you will definitely surprise yourself with how much you can do by just like, not just any 30 minutes, but like, this is the time that I'm spending in this. You will think that you missed your alarm if you set an alarm for yourself. You will think you missed your alarm because you will think that so much time has passed with all the things you've been doing, but it doesn't go by fast. It goes by slow when you're really in there focusing.
Mm. And then maybe like don't day drink on Saturdays, but like draw instead. And like for me, like the weekend is a time where I want to be social. Like I like want to like pack in as much as I can into that like freedom. But then I find like Sunday nights around and I like haven't been productive. And like it's just a matter of like building that discipline into your free time as well, where it would be used like most effectively. And then like maybe sacrificing like being as social.
Yeah, the discipline part actually got me thinking that how you be disciplined is kind of by how you have fun. Like when you make your own work, it should be fun, right?
Yeah.
It should, like it's painful, but also you get so much fun. Like somehow, like I can't explain. Like every people has their own version of fun. But so I think like behind the discipline, that's like having fun, pushing that discipline, because like you get something by like doing it, and you get like happiness, or you get like something you never know you can like do. So that's like kind of like goes together. The fun and discipline goes together. It's kind of like one thing pushes other. That's how I feel. But people do get lazy sometimes, and I do get lazy a lot. But that's okay, I guess. like as long as you go back, yeah.
Right. I think we could open the floor to the audience for questions of any kind related to any aspect of producing work.
What type of job do you recommend working if you want to still stay creative, but not necessarily, you said you had a full-time job and then you had, while you worked on the comic, do you recommend any type of specific jobs that would be good for them?
And is that for everyone or one of the panels in particular?
It doesn't matter who answers that. If I question it right.
I feel like I don't know, I feel like working in publishing, that'll probably like inform your like awareness of how that industry works, which is like inextricable from the comics industry. Even if you want to just be a self-publisher, I think if you like, know how publishing works, that's gonna like give you a leg up. I was lucky enough to get like a master's degree in comics where like we actually focused, I think, primarily on publishing. And I think that just like really informed my like ability to like just make my own afterwards. That or just like any creative sort of field, I think that'll keep you inspired.
Yeah.
Like I work in a creative agency where it's like branding, and I'm an archivist, so I'm literally just like looking at magazines all day.
That's great.
But it's like, I don't know, it's chill, and so at least it's like I'm looking at cool stuff and I'm getting like ideas from like what I'm looking at.
Getting paid for inspiration.
Yeah, for sure.
So my jobs were all in communication design, so I did packaging, web, data visualization, like all different directions. And I think the kind of design work is really helpful for me for like the whole process. And also I was working in a small agency, like I was the only designer, so that really helped me to develop an idea from start to finish. And also you have to like battle through the whole process, like with boss and project manager and client. Sometimes you have to say no to them. And I think the whole working experience is really helpful, like not only creativity, but also in terms of how you communicate with people and how you learn to like stand your ground. And I think that's really important. And even though if you don't get a job in creative field, you still learn a lot from people. I think not people skills. It's basically just like work with people, or that's like so important when in like promoting yourself, I guess. And also in how you like navigate your way in the world, like in the art world or comic world, like no matter world.
I personally don't think that any type of, I think that as soon as you put the word day in front of your job, it doesn't matter. It's just a means to an end. As long as it doesn't, like there are jobs that will stop you from doing other things. They will take over your life, or they will drain your like physical energy. Like maybe if you like, if it can be avoided, because like there's a lot of things that pay really well, but they're very physical. Like a lot of like manual labor jobs pay pretty decently. But if it's going to stop you from drawing because you're just too physically drained, consider whether having like, you know, like an okay amount of money is worth essentially saying that you're probably not going to have the energy to do that. But like, you know, anything that like, if the goal is just to make stuff on your own and you're just looking for support, then literally any job you can get that will cover your expenses is, well, that's what I've done. I happen to work in a place that deals with comic books as objects, just like selling comic books, not creatively or anything. I happen to, but like, it doesn't really matter. Because they could have been selling potatoes, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just that these are more fun to look at. But it doesn't, but like, you know, I talk to people at work who like stopped making stuff that you know, they were artists too. And I just, I think that if you have access to a decent job that can help you just get through like the things you need to get through, then it doesn't really matter what the job is. But you know, if you, of course, if you have an interest in something, then certainly like go for the more creative jobs and stuff like that. And also, a lot of people, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but a lot of people have said that like creative jobs end up sapping their personal creative energy away from their own projects and into the work that they do for work. I hear about that. I'm a little skeptical of it, but it is an opinion that I've seen quite a bit, so, you know.
I feel that probably depends on what kind of work, creative work you make by day. Say that like I was doing design, but the design will only focus on the client's brief, like what they want, what their data, or like what's their goal. So I kind of just act as this like design solution to their goal. It's never really my goal. So I think that's probably okay, but if you're like commercial illustrator, then you illustrate so much and putting yourself in the work and realizing like, you know, like just like how you did your work with plastic. So it's kind of, you put a lot of yourself in there, and it's hard to find the fine line between like commercial or personal. So I think probably that's where it gets tricky. You get like so drained because you put so much of yourself in commercial work and you don't have any energy.
Yeah.
The
There's a hand here and we'll go again.
Okay. I kind of have two questions. The first one is, I'm sorry if you mentioned this earlier. I came kind of late. But what major did you take in undergrad, and how did that lead up to your work right now? If your major was somewhat different from what you're doing right now, how did it change, and did you think that helped you? So that's the first part of the question. And the second is like completely different. So as Ivy had mentioned about working in a smaller firm, I wanted to ask about what you think about working at bigger or smaller companies. I know that there's this debate where for a creative job, you know, like perhaps in a larger company you would have access, or you will work for larger clients and stuff, but in a smaller studio, you know, you would be a larger fish in a smaller pond, and so you get to do multiple things and you learn faster. So yeah, I would like to know what you think about that.
We can start with the major.
Yeah.
Alright.
I majored in creative writing in undergrad, English and creative writing. And I think that was, if I had known I wanted to be a cartoonist at that time, that would still have been the right choice as it was today. Does that make sense? I think that I personally, I think I'm probably a much better writer than I am illustrator. And so I think that the strong suit in my comics is going to be my writing. So I'm glad that I have that experience under my belt. And for me personally, this may set me outside of the majority. But when I'm reading comics, I'm primarily looking at the writing as well. I want the writing to be good. Because that's just what I'm more what appeals to me. And so yeah, I think that my approach has been appropriate to the kind of work that I want to make. But yeah, I don't know. I feel if you majored in art history, that would also benefit your work in its own way. It just depends on what your interests are.
So my bachelor degree was in Hong Kong, and it's Bachelor of Digital Communication. No, it's Digital Graphic Communication, which is not a major anymore. Once I graduate, they just close it down. I don't know why. So I was learning. So as you can see, the name is kind of vague. So basically, we had everything. And I even learned 3D and animation. So animation was a big part. We had to do a 3-minute animation for graduation, which is so intense. It's super labor intensive. That's kind of why I want to switch to a master degree in craft here. So I came here for a master of communication design, but with a focus in packaging design. But I didn't end up doing any packaging after I graduate. It feels like every time I take something and then I divert. It's kind of strange, but it happened to me. So about how the bachelor degree lead up to where I am right now. So I think it's a really good question, because when I was studying bachelor, and I truly felt nothing made sense, because in bachelor degree you have to learn so many different stuff. So we learned ancient Chinese and philosophy, and even social study or research paper on biology. So we had so many different curriculum, and animation and Flash, which is not popular anymore. So at that time I was oh, it feels so much waste. But then I feel every step you go, then you will realize every little piece will probably help you some way. In the future when you make work, like science, I had a science background before I went to college, and then so a lot of my work go back to science, and also I feel the way you learn stuff also help you learn artistically. So learning is also something you learn from learning, right? So I think that's really important in that sense. And for the small company and big company debate, again, I only have a few different spheres. I was also working in a big company too. So I worked in a medium-sized company creatively, and I also work in a big company on the in-house team. So, and I'd say the difference is not so much about small company and big company. I think it's more about the team you are going to be in. So you can be in a really big company like Google or like some other like tech company, but they do have smaller incubators where people have like smaller teams. They work on like smaller company-funded project. Then you're going to be like really developing a really not personal, like really great creative sense because the team is small and the project is small. But also it could happen where in big company you are just like a bot, or you're just like making, you know, like this really production work every single day. That could happen as well. For a smaller company, I'd say generally don't pay as much as big company, which is, I think that's something to consider as well, because if you want to run your side project, everything takes money and you have to consider that. For my experience, the smaller company really helped me to do things independently and to really learn the different hats, wearing different hats. Like that's something you probably won't learn so much in a big company because you're always protected, or you're like you have this like margin between your role and other role.
Do you want to answer the major question, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, I just went to school for illustration because I already knew that I wanted to make comics. So it was a straight shot.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I did. It was actually brought back to previous in the conversation when Daryl specifically talked about like navigating the industry and quote unquote fighting. And I was looking all of you guys up, and I specifically found Daryl's name and how he got into an altercation with somebody who I knew called Diversity in Comics, and I think it's fantastic to see like positive change in the industry in response to a lot of this like reactionary kind of garbage that's so quick and easy to pander to. And it was like when you said fights, like that specifically popped into my mind because like I'm really well versed in that sort of like reactionary culture that's present in a lot of like subcultures regarding like the arts and media, especially stuff like comics, like stuff like that. Especially it's where like there's this constant battle between it's like trying to do something different, like fighting this old guard of people and like actually trying to like make positive change in the industry, but at the same time like sort of putting yourself at the mercy of the market, so to speak. And it's like trying not to compromise and finding your own comfortable niche and being able to stand for your values and even like fight for them. And
Preach.
I noticed you used a lot of really strong language, and I definitely, like, I loved how, like, you didn't specifically back down to any degree, because there comes a point in time you don't really need to afford these people respect, and ultimately when you're doing that, you're doing a disservice to yourself. Am I allowed to get into specifics over that altercation? Do you want to get into it?
Do you want to form this as a question?
I think I just did, actually.
So diversity in comics is actually a trick because he is actually against diversity in comics. He is a bad person and he's also a coward. So there.
Who?
Richard Meyer, Diversity in Comics. He is an abusive coward who harasses many people. If you are not straight, white, cis, and of, I don't know, American immigration naturalization or whatever, that he does not like you, and he will make his little videos, which they tell me about the videos, I don't watch that type of stuff, but like, I get all the overflow from all the people tweeting stuff at me that they watched on some YouTube channel, and you know, based on all that, I can infer that he's telling them a bunch of garbage about me, people I know, people I don't know, just all types of stuff. And the truth is, you just can't, like, I mean, these people, one will never, ever, they just want to make your life uncomfortable somehow. And you will also not ever actually encounter them in real life, like they're not there. I'm always publicly out there in the world, and they never are. They will never do anything except try to like, just make your, they'll just try to, they want to just not really be irritants, they want to use their computers to make your life worse. And they can, but the thing is that like, it's so over the top, they're not subtle about it. So they're not fooling anyone except for other bigots. So then they can have a little cluster of people, but then at the end of the day, nobody normal is going to look at them and be like, okay, I wonder what this guy's up. You know, so but it's a bunch of garbage, but like you can't back down from it at all. Like they can definitely like try to hack your email or something, but they definitely like, they won't, like, they're not going to ever leave their house. They're never going to like jump into the street. Like it's not going to happen. But it might seem like it's going to happen when like hundreds and thousands of people are like actually like digitally pestering you. It might seem like there is something out there to get you, but there isn't. Like, you know, they're loud, they take up a lot of mental space, but they're not even, like, they're barely real people. Like, they won't actually even, like, if you want to talk about like using social media, if you look at somebody's social media account and it's all just like attacks on random artists and stuff, like that's not even that person's social media account. Like the one that's like John Smith is like tweeting about what he ate for lunch like normal people, and this person, he sends a second account probably to like pester all of the women and people of color and trans people that he doesn't like, and you know, it's clearly pathetic. It's clearly weakness, but like if you're not careful, it can get into your head, and you've got to remember that like there are people who don't even know you and will instantly defend you because we're not having it. As much as there is a comics community, we don't care for that sort of stuff. Like we are like in the aftermath of this, people know who I am, but in the aftermath of this, people had, like, I've heard all types of things from people who work in, like, the upper reaches of comics and all stuff. Like, the message I've been given is absolutely nobody tolerates this foolishness. And even though it's disconnected from, like, informal institutions, so it's not like somebody can be, like, fired over this, they will have no entry. They will never be your colleagues. There will always be the little, I don't know, garbage foaming up on the shores of the industry, and they will personally never succeed at anything. And I've never seen any of those people's work outside of the context of them harassing somebody. That is a fact. So.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
There's something that's very interesting about what you just said. Even someone who was huge and had power said something equally stupid. Frank Miller.
Oh my God! Don't get me started.
Frank Miller went on
He's
rants
a
about
crazy
the Occupy
person.
Wall Street people. He called them rapists, scum, and all sorts like that. And the industry shut this guy down. Now, they didn't stop him from selling things, but he basically took down his account and he kept quiet for a good 2-3 years. He's only just now started to pop up at conventions and he keeps his mouth shut because people really took off on him. And he was an idiot. I'm talking about people right at the top, and everyone in between just went through.
Yeah, he really slowed himself down with that.
All right, it is 7:30, so we'll end the formal panel, but if people want to stick around and continue this amazing conversation, you're welcome.